Сега на вашето внимание ще представим господин Франческо Чекарели, който е представител на Фондация Бруно Зеви от Италия.
Thank you very much and good evening, everyone. Well, it is a great pleasure and a great honor for me to represent the Bruno Zevi Foundation of Rome at INTERARCH 2018 on the occasion of the 30-year anniversary of the International Academy of Architecture. In fact, other important occasions merge with this one, reawakening our memory and enlarging our horizons. The next, please. This year we also celebrate the 100-year anniversary of the birth of Bruno Zevi, and having the opportunity to remember him in Sofia today assumes a particular significance that should not be taken for granted. 30 years ago, Zevi was among the founders of the International Academy of Architecture, as Georgi Stoilov reminds us. He followed its activities with great attention for a long time, participating with enthusiasm in its formation, appreciating its mission and international breadth, which allowed him to explore from close the most recent and unconventional developments in Eastern European architecture shortly before the fall of the Berlin Wall. The next. The Zevi archive in Rome contains some important testimonials of his prolific relationship with the Academy. In particular, there is a short documentary that provides us with previously unseen images of the founding ceremony of the Academy, in which we can see some of the key protagonists of cutting-edge architectural research of that period. I would like to show you a few clips from the film, which is itself a historical document that can help us enter into the atmosphere of that first meeting. I would like to let you discover the identity of some of its famous participants, many no longer among us, such as Felix Candela, Aldo Van Eyck, Fray Otto, Giancarlo De Carlo, and Georges Candilis. Well, here is the video we found in the archive. It's a brief but very interesting.
The day of its inaugurating session. It will bring together as in a focus the problems of architecture and town planning, and will give a powerful impetus to architectural theory and creativity. The session was opened by the chairman of the Academic Council and first rector of the Academy, Georgi Stoilov, chairman of the Union of Bulgarian Architects. The academicians are introduced to those present. Each of them is handed an honorary diploma and a medal. Karl Aubelk, Felix Candela, Georges Candilis, Aldo Van Eyck, Fray Otto, Giancarlo De Carlo, Emma Pietila.
Okay, it's only 2 minutes, but the original is much more long. Yes, it's very, very interesting. It's 30 minutes long and very, very important for the history of the Academy. The archive at the Zevi Foundation, together with the library, is the beating heart of the Zevi Foundation in Rome, an institution that was created in 2002, 2 years after the death of the great critic and historian of architecture. It is devoted to preserving the memory of Bruno Zevi, encouraging the study of architectural history and theory, with the goal of supporting, above all, the younger generation of scholars learning about the architectural patrimony and its indivisible connection with the literary and scientific world in accordance with the holistic vision of culture and civic engagement that Bruno Zevi promoted during his entire life. The next. In recent years, in fact, the Zevi Foundation has become an international point of reference that is becoming increasingly well known and appreciated. It has opened doors to a growing number of scholars supporting conferences, lectures, seminars, and giving out the Bruno Zevi Prize for the best essay in architectural history, theory, and criticism that targets graduate students and recent PhDs from around the world. This prize has enabled the publication of important new research in several thematic fields, such as the ancient roots of the modern architectural language, the role of space in architecture, and the relationship between history and architectural practice. The next. Bruno Zevi was born 100 years ago in Rome, and Italy celebrates his memory through the activities of a national committee formed by the Ministry of Culture that has set into motion numerous initiatives on various continents to relaunch the everlasting message of the person who dedicated his entire life to architecture, his history, and criticism, and sustained it through deep civic engagement. The next. Architecture, sustainability, and democracy are three key concepts in the contemporary context. Zevi sought to engage them throughout the entire second half of the 20th century, with his unique intelligence and passion, and with an unmatched communicative spirit that utilized every type of media, projects, books, journals, radio, and TV transmissions too, and that turned his convictions into political action with intransigence and without any compromises. He had taught us to read architecture through the lens of history, which he aimed to make operative and in service of modern architectural practice. History, Zevi believed, should be catapulted into design. In the spatial dimensions of architecture, he knew how to recognize the interpretative key to the physical organization of human environments in which building was done responsibly, in harmony with human needs, and in step with everyday life. The next. Above all, he fought without pause against the widespread ignorance in the fields of architecture and urban planning, seeking to educate and re-educate the architect about architecture and the citizen about citizenship. With the goal of reading urban phenomena by referencing Plato and Leon Battista Alberti, he treated the city as an ever-evolving big house, as well as a palimpsest on which new stories could be constantly rewritten with the stamp of modernity. The next. It pleases me to recall that Ferrara, the Italian city, the first modern European city, according to Jacob Burckhardt, remained for Zevi an urbanistic reference point, which he considered the best equipped laboratory in which to rethink the democratic city as and its completion. Next. Zevi's magisterial book on Ferrari's Renaissance architect Biagio Rossetti, who is currently being celebrated as well on the 500-year anniversary on its death this year, helped us not only to discover the originality of a long-forgotten master of the Renaissance, but it also provided us with a pretext to explain the polyvalent aspects of urban experience, giving us the tools to take in the message of any city in the world. It would be impossible, obviously, and also inappropriate today to offer yet another biographical portrait of Zevi, a cultured, intellectual, and the restless multitasker, an architect, critic, and activist who loved to write about history as he was making it himself. The next. The 100th anniversary of his birth allows us to re-examine his activities and gauge his influence. Numerous events, conferences, exhibitions, and publications have in fact been dedicated to this key figure in architectural history in the post-war period, which are taking place internationally throughout 2018 and over the next 2 years. The next. Just last week, the Technion University in Haifa hosted the conference How to Narrate the History of Architecture, while the University of Palermo in Italy will host the conference entitled Bruno Zevi and His Necessary Heresy on May 23 and 24, so next 2 weeks, which will be dedicated to the diffusion of Zevi's organicism in Italian post-war architectural culture and to his idea of the city. The University of Sapienza in Rome will organize a symposium around a crucial yet controversial theme of Zevi's relationship to the teaching of architecture, while the University of Florence will investigate the relationship between Zevi and other planners in Italy. The next. On 27 and 28 of September, an international conference will take place in São Paulo in Brazil, which will reflect critically on how Zevi influenced the teaching and making of architecture in South America, starting with his participation in 1959 Congresso Internacional Extraordinario de Críticos de Arte. In October, the Graduate School of Design at Harvard will host the symposium entitled Architectural History as Space, on the reception of Zevi's work outside of Italy and Europe. All of this is happening at the same time as Italian architectural publisher seem to be competing to republish some of Zevi's most important works, from his History of Modern Architecture, Storia dell'Architettura Moderna, from Einaudi, this is the publisher, to his How to Understand the City, reissued by Bompiani, and bringing out new manuals in Italian and in English, such as the first guide to organic architecture published by the Edizioni della Fondazione Bruno Zevi. The next. Finally, there are the exhibitions. In order to deepen the theme of Zevi's affinity for Ferrara, it will be necessary to wait until October, when the Fondazione Zevi, will open an exhibition on Bruno Zevi and Biagio Rossetti. The next. This exhibition will take place in the welcoming spaces of Casa Zevi in Via Nomentana 150 in Rome, and it will re-engage and repropose the 1956 exhibition in Ferrara on the great Renaissance architect, the idea of the city, as well as examine the path to publication of Zevi's masterful monography on Rossetti. The next. But in the meantime, only 3 weeks ago, the Maxi Museum in Rome inaugurated a great exposition for the centenary of Zevi entitled Zevi's Architects, History and Counter-History in Italian Architecture from 1944 to 2000. That was curated by Jean-Louis Cohen and Pippo Ciorra. The next. The museum had chosen to tackle the difficult task of displaying the historical trajectory through 3 main levels of narration. The first is an illustrated report on Zevi's biography, reconstructed through his own work and his public activities. The second presents a selection of projects and architects Zevi published on his books and journals, accompanied by his own words, as if he were a posthumous curator of the exhibition. And the third level of the display is the one that addresses Zevi's activism in the communication of architecture, the next. Through a gallery of emblematic and often surprising works linked to 35 figures such as Renzo Piano, Paolo Soleri, Giancarlo De Carlo, Giovanni Michelucci, Franco Albini, and Carlo Mollino, among others. This exhibition offers a new angle on Italian architecture in the period between and right after the 2 World Wars, highlighting the depths and the interests that Zevi could create today in an architectural world that requires the knowledge of its patrimony to understand its past and present, to move architecture towards the future with an optimism that was typical of Bruno Zevi. The next. Finally, we should not forget Zevi's effort to teach architects about culture and make them aware of their social role. Ceccarelli reminded us before, President Ceccarelli. In fact, he believed that the work of an architect had to be understood as a civic obligation with profound moral responsibilities. Architecture infuses in a very deep sense the life of people because it acts upon both the city and the county, determines the quality of everyday existence, and shapes, for better or for worse, the dynamics of civic life. For Zevi, a successful building was, in fact, an essential ingredient of democracy. The next. For this reason, he insisted on ethical values of architecture and on the social responsibility of architects as makers not only of structures, but of freedom and democracy as well. In remembering Zevi and at an important moment of reflection on the architectural profession like the one today in Sofia, it makes sense to fight once again for the expansion of the collective conscience of architecture, to quote Lina Bo-Bardi, a good friend of Zevi. Revisiting the topic of ethical responsibilities of architects and their social role in light of the extremely complex challenges faced by our planet that we are all called to respond to today. Thank you very much.